because the challenges have not been raised to the state yet as to what their policy documents mean for dual language programs. And I seriously doubt that the state ed people want to compromise dual language delivery, but I don't think they've thought through all the things that are in their policy because it does impact certification. Funding support, I'm talking, to make that possible. Okay, and this is what it looks like in a pie chart, right, that you just figure out how to keep increasing the minutes in English. And if you had two people that were fully bilingual implementing the program in the early grades, then you would have the flexibility, even in a side-by-side, to implement this model with control over how many minutes a day are happening in English and how many minutes a day are happening in Spanish and how you're doing the subject matter allocation. Heuristics, yes, in a strange way. You know what I mean? Like if I believe it for kindergarten, why don't I believe it for pre-K? And in certain ways, pre-K is fun and playing, and you know, I could argue that that's an easier grade to do 90-10, but then it's also possible, since you're saying that everything is fine, you're a happy camper no matter which way we slice the pie, it's all sounding good. Because if you start to be a blocker, like, well, what about this, what about that, then you're not letting the idea really come in. So I'm not making you decide anything. You can stay just the way you are. You can happily stay just the way you are. All I'm trying to provide you now is to entertain what the other options are of what you could do and tell you what my concerns are about what you are doing. The alternating day. Now when you alternate the day, you could alternate language by AM, PM, like in the morning, one group is doing all English, and the other group is doing all Spanish. That's one way you could alternate. And then they flip, and whoever did all English in the morning is going to do all Spanish in the afternoon, whatever subjects are taught there, and then you could switch the next day. If you're on a 6-day rotation, then you have to call it day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. If there's a holiday, you suspend and you have day 5 still because it didn't happen because of the vacation, all of that. And the kids will get used to this, and so will you. You just have to be on a 6-day cycle, otherwise it's not 50-50, right? Simple as that. Do my switches AM, PM, or I can do my switches Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I can do that either way. I'm concerned about that because it requires tremendous coordination. It puts a lot of stress, and you must have curriculum in both languages so that you can switch every day. And you have to have equal curriculum in both languages. And if I'm your partner teacher, I have to know where you ended up. And I can never know it as perfectly as you do because I wasn't there yesterday. So when the kids come to me and I see them start to, like it doesn't look like they're understanding, then I'm very likely to go back because I think I have to fill in gaps, and that's putting drag on the curriculum. So when we do the switches, it's heavy-duty coordination, heavy-duty. I got to talk to you all the time, all day long, every day, every subject, everything. And where's the time for that? I have to have curriculum in both languages, which is double the expense to have curriculum in both languages. I should have tests in both languages to fully support the curriculum. It is a very demanding model, very demanding, because one day I'm doing math in Spanish, the next day I'm doing math in English, or AM I'm doing math in Spanish, and then PM I'm doing social studies and science in English, or whatever, right? I've got to be alternating all day long what's happening and how we're switching back and forth, either by AM, PM, or by day, okay? So right now, you do the whole curriculum one day in one language and the whole curriculum the next day in the other language. Does that include language arts? Spanish language arts and English language arts?
Yeah. Well, because we have 2 zones, so the Spanish teacher does everything in Spanish and the English teacher does everything in English.
Language arts?
Yes.
And so the day that it's English, they're only getting language arts in English?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So there is demands that are being placed on the teachers because you are teaching every subject every other day to the other group, having 48 kids that you're managing for all subject areas. And you are responsible for all 48 kids for all subject areas every other day. Kids would get every subject every day, but they would have to switch. Right? They would get every subject every day, but I would be dedicated. And what it would allow me to do is to teach the same thing twice to 2 different groups instead of alternating across the days. Now, what I'm saying is if you fixed it, you would lower your coordination demands if we put language to subject. If I taught math, if I taught social studies and science, I alternated those in the way that I wrote this up. Don't worry if that's not the way you do it. If I taught language arts in Spanish and science and social studies in Spanish, as the kids would switch to me, I would just keep teaching my subjects to them. If you give me a dedicated subject, I know where I left off with every group, and I just pick up the next day when in other words, if every day they get math and English for a marking period, for a semester, for a unit. Okay. If they get math every day with me in English, I know where everybody left off. No, I don't have to talk to anyone but myself, because I know where everybody left off. It could be done by unit. Let's say there's 8 units in math, and 8 units in social studies, and 8 units in science. Unit 1, math happens in English. Only English. And I'm the one who teaches math. When the kids come to me, they get the math unit in English and only English and no Spanish whatsoever for that math, for that marking period or that unit, or however you divide the pie. When they go to science or social studies, whatever I allocate to the other language, it is only happening in Spanish. There is no English whatsoever. I teach it to both groups in Spanish all the time. Then the next unit, Unit 2, this math would go over here and happen in Spanish, and social studies or science would come over here. Social studies could happen in Spanish, and English language arts could happen in English. And then when you change units after 10 weeks, social studies could happen in English, and English language arts could happen in Spanish. You could divide the unit apart by objective. When you don't fix language to subject, you are increasing your coordination demands dramatically. And you are increasing your materials demands dramatically. And you are causing kids, you also have the potential that kids go, I'm not going to listen right now, I'll just wait till tomorrow, and it'll all happen in English. So they're not really investing fully in each language, whereas if math was happening every day in Spanish, and it was continuous, they won't sit on their hands and wait till tomorrow when it happens in English. So 3 days the nonfiction could be over here in one language, and then 3 days the nonfiction would be over here, but you'd be using different books, different curriculum. I continuously teach my subject to both groups, which gives me less prep, and definitely less coordination. And I only need materials for Unit A in one language and not the other. I don't need dual materials and translating everything. To make this 50-50, right? All of this allows you to do 50-50. It's just different arrangements of how one can do 50-50. But I think the biggest advantage of having fixed subject, and it's by semester, by unit, by marking period, by year. Maybe we're going to do math in the 2nd grade in Spanish and in the 3rd grade in English. You have options. Because you have the bridge, the parents shouldn't be worried because you're transferring the concepts to the other language. They're learning it conceptually in one language, but they're expressing their understanding in the other language. So even if I stay all year in one language, if that's my choice. But here, like I would say, maybe a smartest way would be by unit, by marking period, something where the parents see the alternation to the other language. How does translanguaging happen? When do you do it? And they created this period that's called the bridge period, which I will be explaining further, but it would happen during language arts. That's the only part you need to understand now, that when they come to me for language arts, I'm bridging to the other subject, but my only responsibility has to do around language and literacy, connected to the math concept that I know you're teaching over there, but I'm going to try to bridge it. And I can bridge it my own little way, still having control over how I'm bridging things for you as you're learning the unit in math in English, and I'm trying to bridge it to Spanish, and you're trying to bridge my social studies over to English, because we're just developing the language to go along with the concepts and so forth. We still have control over what we're doing. It's less preparation each day, because I'm preparing to teach each lesson twice. And it's definitely, I don't even have to coordinate with you, or hardly at all, because I'm continuously teaching my subject matter, and kids can't get away with anything with me, because I'm seeing them. I'm the only one who's seeing them for that subject matter. Well, I don't think you would want to have within the same school, every grade is doing it differently, because it's too hard for parents to understand how things are happening. But I think that within a school, you could have your own way that you implement it. What I'm showing you here is how you're using language instructionally, but this is still 50-50. And then I'm going to show you with the third grade unit how you could just stay with what you're doing, but still rip apart a unit and take responsibility for certain parts of the unit if it works out equally, which I'm not sure that it does, in terms of that you put as much attention to social studies as you do the language arts within a unit. To make sure it's really, really 50-50 by adding every minute in the day, including recess, including lunch, including assemblies, including specials, not just the other subjects. Which means you've already taken a lot away to English, haven't you? Mm-hmm. So then where's the Spanish going to come in to make up for that? Then you have to, if you're alternating language use, how are you going to do it? Are you going to do alternate day, AM, PM, or are you going to do fixed language use by subject? By marking period, by semester, by year, how are you going to do it? And then you have to figure out, whatever choices you make, how am I going to align to the mainstream curriculum? And again, here's where you have a lot of problems, because if you're alternating everyday language, one person is very happy because they're doing it in English and the curriculum already exists. The other person is crying every night because they have to make all that subject matter in the other language. And they have to do it for every subject in every unit. That's exhausting to create all that material in Spanish. And then you also have to decide what texts you're going to use for each theme, and especially in the other language, the target language, which in all of your cases is Spanish. But you have this is why we say that the program is complex. Look at all the choices that you have to make, and within each choice or decision that you make, there's other decisions that you have to make. Right? And eventually it gets down to a curricular decision. What book will we read? And how long will we have for this unit? And all those instructional things. So one is the model, which is easy to say, oh, we're 50-50. Yeah, and then what? Right? And then all that other stuff is the hard stuff to say, how exactly you're going to deliver it. And pre-K might look different than middle school, might look different than high school, right, because of the length of time that they've been in the program. Do both teachers have appropriate credentials for the program so that they can implement all of the regulations that are on you? Are both teachers very knowledgeable about dual language programs? Were they really well prepared to enter the dual language program? It's a very demanding program, and it has a lot of requirements to make sure that it's going to go well. There's the ideal over here, right? We can all understand it in the abstract of what we're shooting for. But most dual language programs are not, even the one but we need to keep the ideal in mind, because that's what we're shooting for. To make the dual language as efficient and easy to deliver as possible, so that everybody stays in the game, that nobody is opting out. Any unnecessary demand that we could take away because of some alternate way we can think of delivering the program, we would like to do that, because it takes away the demand. So if I get to teach math every day twice in English, woo, I'm happy, because now I'm teaching one less subject. I get to teach it twice. It's still demanded to be a dual language teacher. It's not any less so. But there's also, that many of you have said sitting here today, how much you love your partner. And when you have your own class, that's a very isolated situation. And when you have a partner teacher, now you're in it together. And when it's a great combo, it's a great combo. And it feels so wonderful, because you really do feel like it's a partnership, not just between the children, but also between the adults. And so there are offsetting variables that can make it a very pleasurable way of teaching if we could take away some of the unnecessary freneticism You're developing the curriculum, whatever subject you're teaching, whatever language you're teaching it in, you want to be planning for both groups' native language development across the grades. You want to plan for second language exposure in and out of school. And who is this harder for? Spanish. So you might want to do some extra after-school stuff or create certain opportunities for kids in Spanish because the English naturally occurs, the Spanish does not. And you should only have a certain range. If the kids stay together and you're not losing kids, it should only get so wide, the range of proficiency that you're handling. And that's my concern about you letting kids come in later. You're increasing the range of proficiency that you're having to handle because you keep letting kids in. Okay? It's very hard to deliver a certain program, a certain phonics program, or a certain math program if it only exists in one language and not the other. So language, and that's in essence what's happening with the curriculum units that are Common Core. They were created in English, right? The books were selected in English. They weren't thinking what the book would be in Spanish. We're getting curriculum and we're being told that of course we will implement the same curriculum as the rest of the school and then we have to figure out how to do that. So I already told you that my choice, if I were you, is I would do fixed subjects. I wouldn't give myself that heavy because it's demanding enough without that. But you have other marching orders, and also you've been implementing this for some time, and I'm not sure what your decision will be. To pick apart the unit and to decide, well, what parts of this unit are going to happen in English, and what parts of this unit are going to happen in Spanish. And let's divide it really clearly so that you can go on your merry way teaching your part of the unit in English, and I can go my merry way teaching my part of the unit in Spanish. And we'll coordinate a little bit, but not as much as we've been doing because we're not trying to do the unit exactly as it was configured. You would be dividing up the unit goals and objectives your own way, and then you would not be implementing it maybe exactly the way that the mainstream classrooms are implementing that unit because of how you're pulling it apart. If it were me, I would sit with my partner, I would divide up the unit goals and objectives so that I can teach continuously and you can teach continuously as kids come to me. And that's all I'm responsible for, the objectives that I picked. Books that are written into the unit will never get done. But we will be implementing the goals and objectives of the unit, just with different material. Think of what the coquille means within Puerto Rican culture, and I'm sure that there are other animals that have real cultural significance. Let me do those. They mean something. I wouldn't do, if it was doing millipedes and sloths and sharks, and I don't feel that those fit culturally into the context of Latin American culture, I might use other animals that are more common, like tree frogs. She was talking about Puerto Rico, right? Coquille and other animals. Like, why are you sticking me with sloths? You know? I would also create parallel tasks to those that are given in the New York Engage unit. So if they had to write an editorial, well, I will also have the kids write an editorial, but we'll do it around the content that I've decided that they're going to do, right? So I'm pretty much saluting the flag and saying yes to all the objectives, including the content behind you. And what's hard is when you don't, or everybody's shoving things at you that you don't know how you're supposed to deliver that in a dual language program. So to me, it does have to do with the teacher's proficiency and the materials that are available to you and all of that. But more, it has to do with how solid you are with your curriculum and how secure you are with your curriculum and how able you feel to complete the curriculum. So I think funding curriculum work is really important to the success of dual language programs. You need it, however it's going to happen. And like I say, some districts do it by having a curriculum specialist who's supporting all the grades, who every day all they do is write and develop curriculum and bring it to you. And others do it by giving you summer paid weeks to develop curriculum that you will use for the following year. At a certain point you need stability, or how are you going to design curriculum? You don't know what to design if you keep changing everything. So I think you need to get solid with however you're going to do the language use plan. And remember, the model is the % of time of each language across the grades. So if you're pretty decided 50-50 straight through, then you still have other decisions to make and finalize, so you can develop curriculum to support that. Definitely you want to decide on the text that you're going to use and try hard to not use translated texts, because they usually don't come off well in the other language, so it's better for you to find text that was authentically written in each language. And in particular, as it regards literature, really come out of the Hispanic world, and it shouldn't be something that gets translated. But you have Spanish standards, and those need to be written into the units, okay, because they exist.
But we have to stand strong and be advocates for ourselves. So you, as part of the unit person, has to say, this needs to be incorporated in there. If we are not the first ones to start saying this, like, I have to be honest with you, Nancy just blew my mind when she said, where are the NLA standards in this?
Right.
It never even occurred to me.
But they have to come from administration.
But no, because administration is not creating the curriculum. We have over 700 kids. We've been here since 2003. If right now people don't realize that this is the reality of our school district, that half of the kids in this district are Hispanic, we have to be advocate for ourselves. Nancy says something that I think I've been saying to everybody for a long time, but I don't think, and I understand why you can't hear this. Because you're in a building with 17 other teachers, and you're trying to keep up with them. And I've always said, Do Language has its own pacing calendar. Do Language has its own report card issues. Do Language has this, Do Language has that. If we are not advocating either through me or through each other, then we're always going to feel that we're never comparable to them. What Nancy said about we take this portion that I'm going to teach in Spanish, we take this portion that I'm going to teach in English. In your mind, you have to realize that together you are meeting all those goals for the end of the year. So when I hear my people saying, well, I don't have enough time because I'm only with kids half the time, you are forgetting your partner. You are denying your partner's work. They are teaching one student all the content. Half of it just happens to be in English, half of it just happens to be in Spanish. I remember when we first started this cohort idea, we decided that we were not going to teach a different curriculum because we wanted them to be able to talk to their peers in the playground, to parents outside of school. We're all learning the same thing, except that our kids are going to be lucky enough to be able to speak about these things in 2 languages. So we have to continue that same mentality for ourselves. So maybe we have a goal for our kids, but maybe we should have a goal for our teachers. What are our beliefs about dual language? Because if we're always thinking that we're behind or that we're not doing exactly the same things, then we are putting ourselves at a disadvantage, and then you're going to be frustrated and you're going to be disheartened, and then you're going to want to leave the program. And that's the last thing that I want to happen.
We need to look at things like word difficulty, sentence length, the text cohesion. All of this is like super important for us to look at. And this comes straight out of Common Core. They're saying we should do this too.